There we go. All right, let me go back to share one more time. Okay, so as I said, we always kind of start things off a little bit of WordPress news and events, and this time we're mixing up. Peter's got the news. I'm doing the tools and tips. So this was a news story that caught both of our eyes. So Peter, do you want to talk about this one a little bit?
Yeah, I'll talk about it. What this story is about is that accessibility has proven to be more and more important to everybody, and what accessibility is and why it actually hit a big spotlight over the last year is because there were some very, very important websites out there that weren't working for people who had accessibility issues where they had whatever form of disability. And people tend to often think in terms of vision impairment, but there are any number of categories of impairments or disabilities that can make it difficult to use a website. And whenever we talk about a website accessibility, it is making sure that a website works for everybody. And one of the things that called a lot of attention to this is with things like vaccine signups and finding information about things that happened in the pandemic, along with just regular activities that happen at the government level, the state and local government. There were issues where people could not use the websites that they needed to use, and Colorado recognized that, and they did pass a law in the state requiring that that websites meet accessibility standards. These are state and local websites, and there are accessibility rules in place already, even that are universal for the because of the ADA and all the regulations that are out there. And we're going to talk about that in a future meetup, getting into all the details. But this one was interesting because of again, for one thing, being the first, there is a government compliance. It's the 5.8 compliance that somebody might run into, especially if you're a nonprofit and you receive federal money. But not only is this in Colorado, was it a law that says you have to be accessible, but at the same time, it meant that they could have resources to make sure that things were accessible. So it was a really good and powerful intention to make sure that the websites that people need work for everybody. And so this was a good story. Hopefully more states will follow suit. Some of them might be following based on the fact that other rules, regulations, or recommendations are out there. But by making it this state mandate that also could include resources to get things done, that's very helpful to the community that really benefits or could use accessibility assistance.
And I'm sure they won't be the last. I mean, that was kind of what we brought to people's attention to. I'm sure they're the first of many coming up. So yeah, as Peter said, we're going to really cover accessibility is a pretty broad topic. So at some point, we're going to cover that in a lot more in depth. So, but this was again, this kind of came up recently in the news around, especially from a WordPress standpoint. So we'll share the links with everyone afterwards if you want to read into this story a little bit more. So, thanks, Peter.
Yep.
So other quick news: WordCamp US is coming up in October, and it's going to be online again. So for people who don't know, WordCamp, there's WordCamp Europe, I think just happened last month, I believe, not too long ago. And
yep,
that was online as well. That's if you actually search for WordCamp Europe on YouTube, you'll find recordings of those sessions. So right now they just put an announcement out for the US WordCamp. It's going to be October 1st. It's going to be a one-day event. Some other WordCamps in the past were multiple days. I think they decided to make this a one-day event to try to get draw up a lot of interest to kind of build the buzz around it. So there's gonna be a lot of opportunities there, both for learning and networking, and really I think also getting a good idea of where WordPress itself is going. So if nothing else, the WordCamp USs are a great place to hear kind of Matt Mullenweg's kind of state of the word, or kind of just talking about the vision of where things are going and talking about the past year. So definitely say check it out. If you can't attend it the day of the event, go back. We'll mention this obviously coming up in October. We'll remind you, but throw it on your calendar. It's a good one to check out. So our tools and plugins, I wanted to make a couple choices that are probably relevant to our topic and conversation tonight. So the two that I really wanted to talk about, and one's a plugin and one is a theme. So let me just show these real quick. So one topic we're going to jump into in a couple minutes is Peter's going to show one of the big changes that you'll see with WordPress 5.8 is to the widget area. And for some people, maybe it's a little too dramatic. You're not ready for it yet, but again, don't panic. There's a plugin for that. So if you're not ready to use the new block editor for widgets, there is a plugin available. And this time, unfortunately, it is written by the WordPress team. So if you go to the WordPress repository and you search for classic widgets, if you activate it, so I'll show this real quick. I don't want to steal too much of Peter's thunder, but tell you what, I'll show you just a sneak peek real quick. So if you go to the new widget area, we'll go through this a lot more in a minute. This is what it looks like. If this frightens you or for whatever reason, if this is incompatible with your theme, etc., what you can do is you can install the new plugin here, install this classic widgets plugin. And when you activate it, as you might imagine, you go here, click on widgets, and lo and behold, you're back to the old classic vanilla widgets. So and if you search on the repository for classic, you're going to get this as like your #2 choice. The classic editor is still #1. Some people are really not willing to go to the block editor. So that's the first one I wanted to mention. The other one, we'll look at this a little bit more in action later, and I'll kind of explain why this is needed. But if you want to play around with some of the things we'll be talking about tonight, especially the full site editing, we'll get into it a little bit, but not a lot of themes currently support it. But if you have a test demo site someplace, or you just want to, if you're using local, we talked about local by Flywheel in the past, if you want to set up kind of a sandbox and test it out, what I'd recommend is just to get a theme that it supports a lot of the things we'll be talking about in terms of full site editing. And the one that's created by WordPress is, one second here, it's called TT1 Blocks. I don't get the TT1, but whatever, so if you do a search on this, so the current thing, and this surprised me a little bit as I was doing research for tonight's topic, the current 2021, that's what it means still. The current 2021 theme does not support full site editing. I'm a little slow here today. But TT1 Blocks, if you do a search on that, it's basically the 2021 theme, but block enabled. So once you activate this, one of the first things it'll tell you, I'll show you this real quick, is it requires a Gutenberg plugin. So make sure you install, remember the Gutenberg plugin, and this confuses people sometimes. If you're just using the block editor, you do not need to have the Gutenberg plugin installed to use what people call Gutenberg. The Gutenberg plugin is more for advanced beta features coming out. So in general, I would say, Peter, I don't know if you disagree or not, but this is not something you typically want activated on a production website. This is really for really for something of you're testing out things, you're playing around like we are, to come up with the demos for tonight. So, but you first have to install and activate the Gutenberg plugin. So you get that from the WordPress repository. And once you do, now you can go and turn on this theme. So I'll show the theme a little bit later as we get into some details, but just so you know that, again, there is one available if you want to play around with it. It's called TT1 Blocks. All right, so that's our tips and tools for tonight. Again, kind of relevant to tonight's topic. So why don't we jump into the topic itself? Hold on, I think I actually have the slides open here. Here we go. Unless I will make full screen. Give me 1 second. Actually, yeah, I'll make it full screen for now. I'll break out a full screen once we start doing demos. So again, welcome. Our topic is WordPress 5.8. We're going to do a deep dive into really the most significant features. There's a lot to it. We're not going to cover 100% of what's in the release, but the ones that we think will be of most interest to everyone. So real quick, here's our planned agenda for tonight. So Peter and I will just introduce ourselves if you don't know us. And then we're going to spend some time talking about, I think, these aren't necessarily in order of I guess, importance, but I think the first two are probably the ones that most people are most interested in. So Peter's going to talk about the blocks in the widget area, the thing I just showed a couple minutes ago, how that works. I'll talk about the query loop block. That's a new kind of exciting block that's coming out as part of 5.8. And we'll cover other things like image enhancements, some block editor improvements, the pattern repository, which I think is one of the hidden gems in this release. I'll go to some of the geeky stuff like theme.json. We'll talk about what that is. And then Peter and I will talk kind of at the end as we're doing our wrap up. We'll talk a bit more about the template editor and full site editing, because that's something I think that has been talked a lot about in this release, but we'll give our thoughts about kind of where that is. So real quick, I'm Ray, one of the co-organizers of the Hartford WordPress group. I've been in IT 25 plus years, as a software developer / software architect, worked for some large enterprise companies in my career. Been using WordPress 5-ish years or so. Self-employed, I have my own business building websites for small businesses, nonprofits. I live in Newington, Connecticut, married, no kids. We have one crazy old cat, and I'm a geek. Peter.
Hi, I'm Peter Ingersoll. I live in South Windsor, Connecticut. I've been using technology for marketing communications for quite a while now. Been using WordPress for, I should just go look it up, but whenever 2.9 came out, I've been lucky enough to work for places where I can really invent and build my skills with WordPress. I'm self-taught in a lot of things. As I said, I'm living in South Windsor, and new to this list is I have 2 new kittens. So I have joined the cat world with Ray. You've got the one crazy old one. I got 2 crazy new ones. So they're that's I don't know where they are. Leah's being really nice today. I think they're upstairs for the moment. So
I'm sure they'll run on your keyboard at some point during the presentation.
Oh, they've done that. All of a sudden things start beeping, and I'm like, what's going on? And I look behind the monitor, and there's one of them laying on the warm laptop.
The biggest investment in infrastructure in a generation, and it's going to create at least 650.
Let me just mute for a second.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
All right.
All right. So Peter, you want me to flip through the slides, and then I'll break out when it's time for the demo?
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great. Thank you.
Yep.
Let me make sure it's pulled up. All right. So one of the big changes in 5.8 is block-based widgets, and one of the reasons we wanted to make sure that we covered it right up front, and all, because it's something that a lot of people are going to see once they upgrade, and whether you do it manually, whether you have a host. I had a number of sites that automatically got upgraded, so you go in there to 5.8, and if you use sidebars or widgets in your footer, any widget area, 5.8, you've got block-based widgets. And so what is it? It is now widget areas and sidebars. They now use blocks and the block editor. It is virtually the same. There's some small differences, but virtually the same editing experience as you would get in pages and posts if you're using the block editor. Some notes about it talk about so one of the benefits of this is that you can get layouts and sidebars with blocks, including by device. So really anything you could do on a page, if you have blocks that have layouts, you could do in a sidebar. The environment is going to be very familiar if you use blocks already. You can use blocks that are already in the editor, plus any blocks that are sidebar specific. So for example, WordPress 5.8, there are specific blocks that are now in core that have replaced a lot of the original core widgets. And for the most part, legacy blocks continue to work. All the WordPress ones do. One that I just happened to pull out of the repository and test today did not work. So that I got lucky enough to find one out of so many that there's not really a big issue, but you just need to check to see if you have a widget sitting in a widget area sidebar something from a plugin that you've downloaded that maybe isn't playing nice for whatever reason, some coding, things like that. Next slide. Will. Okay, so some of the things as I started using it and some suggestions and all, is I find that we'll show this that using appearance widgets is easier than using the customizer, simply because you have more room. I haven't found or didn't experience, because I didn't really find if there was a way to totally expand it. I couldn't drag in the customizer my window wider. So I like working in appearance widgets, which I'll show you, but it gives you more room to work. There are little things you'll find, like you place a widget that you've seen that has a widget title. Now you go to use the equivalent and it doesn't have a title, but you would just use a headline block or a heading block to manage, and we'll do that in our demo. There's some interesting things, like if you have a theme that has a different color background, or you've set your sidebar to have a different color background, and you start putting widgets blocks together to make kind of one widget, what you would normally think of widgets, they might appear separate. A simple solution to that is to group them, and then WordPress, when it presents them, will present them as kind of that same area. If you're used to a sidebar background that has, say, a background color, and you have different widgets where there's spaces and all, it's interesting when you first put blocks, you might go to it and go, why is everything separate? It's because they are separate blocks, and you can use grouping. Mind padding and margins, some blocks, they'll have automatic margins set in, and if your sidebar has already got some margins, you may be squishing yourself more than you need to. And one other thing is to remember to update the widget page. If you're used to the kind of the old widget environment, a lot of the saving happened automatically, or just that widget got saved. But since the block-based widget area is now kind of saved in effect as a page or a post, it's a kind of a post type, just remember to save it before closing a page, because you might lose the work that you've done. That was just some highlights from experiment. I think we're going right into a demo.
Yep. Stop sharing.
Yeah, so let me take the screen. You're looking at my screen here?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. So as Ray already showed, and what everybody's kind of used to, this is the 5.72 and before widget area and way of managing sidebars. Again, we talked about this in previous ones, some of the language, a widget area, a sidebar, but a sidebar can also be a section in your footer, your header, depending on how your theme is set up. This particular theme has a number of widget areas that you can use or not use. So kind of without doing anything, I've got my right sidebar and the default search, recent posts, recent comments, and then I added something, a site origin. I just wanted to bring in a third-party plugin. So when you look at that, the front end, this is, what you see. This is kind of what we're used to. Well, when you upgrade, and I could upgrade on this, and the first thing you'll do is you'll see a little splash screen that says "Welcome to the widget block editor." But now all of a sudden, instead of this kind of environment where you're dragging and dropping, things into your widget area, you're now in this kind of area where, like the block editor, you have blocks that you can bring in to this area. So I've kind of simulated what was over on my old page. The first thing I did was just have those same defaults, and these pages look virtually the same. You get one little thing with some of the spacing on this particular third-party widget that I brought in, but the core, I'm clicking back and forth, and you see basically no difference whatsoever between the core, the 5.7 and previous version 5.8. So what happens is when you first look at it, when I click on the original, you'll see that these are called legacy widgets. Okay, so on an upgrade, if you go from 5.7 to 5.8 and you have widget areas and you have any of the original widgets, they will be called legacy widgets. Okay, but now what's interesting too is those same widgets are now replaced by new core block widgets. These will work, and in fact you can still install them and use legacy widgets, now blocks in your block area. But if you go to, say, again, you'll look at this and here are all my different those same widget areas that you saw over here on the side. Now everything is kind of stacked. That from here, if I wanted to add something to this or remove it and all, I'm going to be acting as if I'm just like the block editor. So I can click over to the plus here or the plus here, which will allow me to add blocks. What's interesting is if you want to browse all, which is the same equivalent of clicking this plus, if you scroll down, you'll see that here are the widgets blocks, which are kind of equivalents to what we've had before. So say I wanted to have I don't have a lot of posts on this demo. I really just have one, but it's the latest posts. If I drag here versus recent posts, that is the same information that's coming over, but the legacy had a title there. Well, in the block editor, you have far more control over how you manage some of this stuff. So in effect, you don't have that title here. If you look at the if we look at the options for this block, right? So working just like in the site editor, you can turn things on or off. I can look at the meta settings and things like that by turning them on and off. These are all kind of features of this particular, in this case, we're looking at the latest post widget. But if I wanted the title, I might come up here and go and add I'll do it below. Sometimes it's easier to do things below, and I'll add a headline block, and then I'll say recent posts, if that's what I actually want to title this. I'm using actually generate blocks headline. People who know me know I kind of like that. And if I view this, I'm going to update this and view this. Okay, that's saved. I am on, by the way, so in place of the local and array, this is, I shared this. This is an interesting website called InstaWP, where you can spin up websites absolutely for free for like a couple of days if you wanted to do a sandbox. And that's all this is. These are free, completely. I could do anything I want, but in a day and a half, it'll be deleted unless I want to pay to have a little bit more. But here's where I updated. Now there's my headline, and here's my block, and here's the example I was telling you about in terms of grouping these. See how these are actually, and depending on your screen, and I know this is a very light gray. If I come back here now and I go to my recent posts, and just like you would in a regular page, if I come up here and now group those, and I'll update that, make sure it saves, I'll reload that. And now this white box, because they're grouped, they're now considered like a widget. That's an interesting thing when people are, like I had said in the notes before. So here's an example. Now I might just, if I remove my recent post block and just use, oh, and look there. This is one of the things. What I just did is I deleted the wrong one, but that's okay. See how I've got the title, and I click on that, and I've got the legacy. Can I Control Z it? Yep. Control Z to undo very nice. Because I had moved that up, and here's my legacy. Instead of deleting, because I know we're on time, I want to show you a couple other things, like, you know, regular blocks that you can bring over. So again, I'm in sidebar. If I wanted to put an image in here, I can just go grab an image from my media library or upload it. Maybe I want this guy here. Of course, that's much too big for this area, but let's just come here. And now, oh, I happen to drop it in the group. So here's an example of knowing how your groups work. See, this is the outline for the group block. If I were to take this guy here, and again, just like the regular editor, move it, position it up, update. Refresh that. So now this guy's his own. So yeah, if you could see the outline, it is, that block is kind of the equivalent of what we're looking for with the old version of widgets. But what I could do is I could go add more headlines. I could do anything that I could do that we've shown in previous, you know, in our build where we're adding buttons and all. That's all in the normal block editor. We can now put in our sidebar. And the benefit of this is we have the power of all of those blocks available to us without necessarily having to go find a plugin that gives us a call to action block. We could build one pretty easily if we, you know, with a headline block, a paragraph if we want some text, an image if we want that. We could put cover blocks here. All the things that we can do using the block editor page, we can now put in a sidebar that is now going to be universal to all different pages. I want to be, I could show more things, but aware of time, Ray, time check on that.
Yeah, we can get back to, again, we can look at this after, because the widget thing, it's interesting. It's also the first taste of, I think, what's, you know, we'll talk about later from a full site editing standpoint. But yeah, I mean, the idea is basically almost any block that you can use. You know, it's one of those things that you think about it now, it's like, why was that area so constrained in the past? You know,
Right.
It's not like it's anything different from the rest of your site. It's just, you know, for some reason they had all these different, this is a widget and that's something else. It's like, it's not really. So
Exactly. But you know, I love having the same editing experience that we have on pages, you know, just using those same, either the drag and drop, or if you like the up and down arrow. You know, I use generate blocks for building things, and I can build, you know, my own call to action type buttons and things like that. It's pretty powerful once you just realize, hey, it's the same editor. But yeah, those few blocks that are very specific, you know, that kind of match the previous widgets that you'll see here with some additional, I think there's some additional things added, but, you know, again, being able to just drag and drop those.
Hey, Peter, a question came up from Sandy about, Sandy asked, can we name and save widgets as global linked together so that if we use them, I think, Sandy, is your question more about can they be global in the sense of reused, like elsewhere?
Stored within the site with a name, like so that I could use that calendar on a couple of pages by just using the same one.
Yeah, I think maybe to rephrase your question a little bit, because I mean, you said widget, but if you think about these are just blocks. So, Peter, like, yeah, can these blocks be saved as reusable blocks? I would assume yes, they can be, because
I would assume yes, but I honestly, I haven't tried that. Now, if I'm not looking at this block right here, I don't have a save as reusable.
Yeah.
So what I need to do in this demo, and maybe Ray, when you're doing it, I'll go to a page, I'll create these. So that's another thing you could do. You can go to like a draft page or something that people aren't going to see, and create a number of things there. Now you can definitely copy those and paste them in. What I haven't tried, and that's a great question, Sandy, can I save them as a reusable block? And will the widget block editor experience, and I did notice that there are some subtle differences, will I be able to see that when I go under widgets? Will I see blocks, block patterns, and reusable blocks as choices, or is that not a choice yet in the side, in the widget area? So if you allow me, between now and when Ray's doing a few things, I'll do a quick thing, but I don't want to fumble through that right now, if that's okay. But I will absolutely check that right now.
I do see duplicates, so I would assume that's going to be on the same page, but
Yeah, well, at least within,
Yes.
yeah.
Right, exactly. If I did that, I get two of my guys here. And you would use that, for example, if you did a kind of a call to action. At the very least, you could duplicate it and then just edit it. But yeah, I don't see.
That's a great question. Yeah. 'cause
Yeah, it's a great question. Let's try to get that answered before our call is up.
All right. So you want me to?
Excellent.
You want me to take it back, Peter?
Yeah. Yep. Unless there's any other questions.
Any questions on blocks in the widget area right now from anyone?
And if they come up later, we'll do. We're trying to have a little bit of time at the end where we can do some more Q&A.
Okay.
Good.
If not,
Okay.
let me.
Great.
I'm actually going to get out of. I hate being in this mode. Sorry, it's a little bit easier for me to share. Make the screen a little bit bigger. And sorry, I hate everyone because that was not navigating properly. All right, so that's the first taste, though, I think, of as we said, full site editing. So that, again, we didn't cover, but that thought, we'll talk about this later, is okay. Now we're talking widgets and sidebars. Where else can we start, using blocks? So more to come. Hold that thought. But another interesting block that is introduced in 5.8 is the query loop block. So let's talk about this a bit. What is this? What is it? It's a block which allows you to retrieve and display a dynamic list of blog posts, pages, or custom post types. And why should you care? Well, because in the past, to do something like that, believe it or not, you had to be either a developer, you have to write that code yourself, or use a theme maybe that would have a component in there, let's say like a portfolio component or something that would do it for you, or you'd have to use a plugin to do that. So now, by using this query loop block, which I'll show you in a little bit, you can basically drag a block on and do it yourself. So you don't need to do any of these other things. And again, just to kind of remind people in the past, when I say write code, this is kind of what the code looked like. So this is an example of writing a query loop the old way. And in this example, it's for a custom post type. So the way you would write these things was kind of a combination of it was PHP code, because obviously that's what WordPress speaks, but then it was also setting arguments and things that are more specific towards WordPress. So you kind of have to know, the WordPress API, you have to know PHP, and then you have to know when you're outputting this thing to display it, you have to know a bit of HTML. So kind of, again, it really wasn't something for the faint of heart. And it seems like such a basic thing built into WordPress. So it's something I think that's been lacking for quite a while. So how does it work? So in the block editor, and I'll show this more in the demo, what you start off with is you start off with the query part of this. So you define visually, using settings, you define your query parameters. And then later, as part of that, you also say, well, the display part of it is what's in a template. So the template will be the output of your query. And again, query for people who aren't IT, we're geeks and nerds like myself. Query just means retrieving data from your WordPress database by some kind of criteria. So, the criteria could be post type. So I want particular, pages or posts or custom post types. A query can include things like order by, so sorting, how do I want these things retrieved? And filtering too. So that's where you include or exclude data. So let's say I only want things for a certain category of post. I only want certain posts from certain authors or keywords. That's the query part of it. And again, you can do this all now visually. The other part of it is the template. So that's the displaying piece of it. And this introduces something new I think we're going to see in WordPress going forward. So you'll see this more in the demo. There's this idea of a pattern inserter. So just like we talk about reusable blocks, as you're inserting your template of what you're going to display in the query, there's a new visual thing that we'll look at in a couple of minutes, which is called the pattern inserter. And it's kind of neat. Like if you used page builders before, you've probably seen something like this. So it gives you a quick visual representation of what your data is going to look like. So rather than having to try it, delete it, come back, try it over and over again, this will show you some pre-built patterns of what your template may look like. So this one comes right now with these 6. I won't go through them all, but you'll see that makes more sense when you see them visually. And then you can scroll through these patterns. So we'll see that in the demo. And when you select one, so whichever one you want, here's what actually gets inserted into the block. So you have the way this thing is structured. You have the query loop at the top, the post template, and then all these pieces that make up the post template. And you're not just limited to this. So in this case, the template I chose has post title, featured image, excerpt. You can delete these, move these around, add new ones, etc. So it's very flexible in that sense. This is kind of the beginning of the template, but all these pieces can be modified. So let's look at what this looks like in action. So let me minimize that for a second. I've got my site up here, and for this, you can use any template. You don't have to use the block enabled template for it. So let me just make sure I have everything set back to, I have Gutenberg, classic widgets. I don't want that. Gutenberg deactivated. So now we're nice, a fresh site. So this is my test site. There's really nothing on it. It just, WordPress 5.8. Just to show you the home page right now, there's absolutely nothing there. It's just a blank page. So what I'm going to do here is I've preloaded this with a bunch of posts on the back. So I'm going to add a section in here to add a query loop in here to pull the posts, and then we're going to mess around with that, and we're going to style those posts. So let's start off that page. Let me go to the home page here. Let's go and edit the home page. So as soon as I hit add block, here it is. Or you can just search for it, query loop, or browse all. But so first thing you do is when you select the query loop, as I said, the first thing you'll notice is it's giving me different patterns. So this confused me a little bit. So this may confuse others. When I first looked at this, I said, oh, does this mean I can only do a carousel view of my posts and a grid view? This has nothing to do with what's going to be inserted from a template. This is saying all of my patterns, I can view my patterns either as a carousel, which means here's what every pattern looks like. It's giving me a visual representation of what these posts will look like. Or if I want to see them all at once, click on the grid view. So far, nothing's inserted into my page. There's nothing to do with the way that the actual layout will look. This is just showing me as I'm choosing this, which one I can choose. So here's kind of the 6 standard ones that came out of the box. As I said, the standard one will have a title, the featured image, etc. There's one with the image on the left. So it's, we'll talk about this a little bit later. They're not great. I mean, they're a good starting point. And a lot of this stuff you'll see that we're talking about today, they're the beginnings of something that you got to have a little imagination of where all this stuff is going to go in the future. But it's better than, as I said, you saving something, having to delete it and go back. So this gives you at least a visual idea of what your post will display as. So I'll stick with the basic one for now. So as soon as you click one of these, it'll then insert it into your page. So I'll click on standard. There we go. So now I have in here a query loop, and I know I'm going to show this a bit more in a second, but just so you see from a list view standpoint, here we go. We've got a query. This is the post template, and here's all the parts in the template. So let's break this down a little bit and show you kind of what's happening here. So let's start with the query loop itself. So as I said, the query is saying retrieve data from the WordPress database. So here you can visually decide, what do I want to retrieve? So as you look here, for example, what kind of posts do I want to retrieve? I can retrieve posts or pages or custom post types. I don't have any on the site. So in this example, I want to retrieve blog posts. So that's good. I want to keep that blog posts. What order do I want to have them retrieved? generally newest to oldest, but let's say you can do alphabetical. So let's do alphabetical, or Z to A. It doesn't make a lot of sense. A to Z, something like that. There we go. Let's say we're going to do them alphabetical for whatever reason. So you have a couple of options in here. One of the ones I'll show in a second here is categories. So I happen to know for this one, I created some fake categories. I created one called breaking news. So as soon as I type that in, now it's going to filter and say only the posts that are categorized as breaking news. And you can have multiple categories here. Those will be retrieved back. So this is the beginning of when I showed you before. You used to have to write this in code. You'd have to put in filters and do other things to do this. Now this is all kind of visually, you can choose this. So that's the query part of it. That's the data being retrieved. Now let's look a little bit more at the post template itself. So and actually one more thing on the query, I guess this is kind of tied to the post template as well. Here you can start to control, how many of these items do I want to be applied to each template? So in this case, by default, it's saying one. So one post will get this template. But what if I say I want to have, let's say, 3 on a page? And unfortunately, my screen's a little bit wonky, so you can't see it all here. So if we look at, I'm trying to get your window off of my Zoom window here. We look at the parts of this. Right now, as I said, the post template itself is made up of post title, featured image, post excerpt, there's a separator, and the post date. Well, let's say I want to add something else in here. Maybe I don't want the post date. I can remove something. So just like any other block, I can go in here and remove that. So let's say I don't want post date, but I want to add something else in here. I want to add in, I don't know, a social icon, or maybe, let's say social icons. So every one of these, I want to have a social icon so people can share this story or blog, whatever, on social media. So if I add my social icon in here, let's see which one I can add in. I'll just put in Facebook for now. Now in my template, let me update this so you can start to see this a little bit visually. Now my template on my home page, as soon as I refresh this, I've got the title, I've got the image. Where's my, I need a link on these guys. That's why it's not showing up, sorry. Let's say, okay. And then I update this again, because if I had a blank link, nothing showed. There we go. So now I have I have my social icon here. So you can customize these a bit. Again, some things probably make sense or make less sense to put here. Again, you want excerpts or summaries for blog posts, but you think about this from a custom post type standpoint, which we're going to be doing it in the very near future. This can be pretty powerful of what you want to display. So now let's talk about just from a styling standpoint. As you can see, this is where I'm displaying 3 on this page, but they're displaying as a list. Well, what if I want to display that a little bit differently? So I do have some control of that. Let me remember where it is. I think it's back up in the templates. 1 second. So here I'm displaying them as a list, but what if I want them as a grid? Okay. So I want to display them as a grid view, and I do have control over the number of columns. So I'm sorry, let me go. So back to my query loop, if you remember, I said I'm going to retrieve 3 of these. So 3, most likely you want to display is probably 3 columns. But let's say I'm going to change my query loop for a second, and I'm going to retrieve back 6 of them. So this is going to retrieve 6 at a time, in my query. But now from a display standpoint, let's say I want to display them as columns of 3. I can do columns of 2. Let's see what columns of 2 looks like. So that should be 3 rows of 2 columns each. And there we go. So this is the beginning. I won't spend a lot of time digging too much into this, but just hopefully you're following the process here of, the first part was defining your query, so retrieving data back from your database. The second part is your template. So that's the layout or display of what the data is going to look like. And you have some control of some additional features like, do you want to display it as a grid or as a list, some columns. So there's a bit of styling in it. I will say it's early days in this. So if you have used some other plugins, or if you have used or if you've done your own coding, for example, you'll have a lot more control over things. I mean, I think you'll find this common theme throughout the feature we're showing today. They're not 100% of the way there. And you know, I think there's still going to be a need on a lot of live sites for you to probably, especially as you need better features. Like, let's say you want a nice portfolio grid. If you've used plugins like that, and I have, this probably isn't going to cut it right now. But this is the beginnings, I think, of where a lot of things are going to be going in WordPress. As I said, in the past, you couldn't do even what I just showed, which seems fairly simple. There was no way for you to do this without doing code or doing, you know, a plugin. So it's starting to get there. Like I said, it's not 100% where I would like it to be, but it's exciting. You know, really is exciting of what you can start doing with these kind of blocks. So I'll shut up there for a second. Any questions on the query loop? Has anyone ever written one of these in the past from code or in a template or a child thing? A lot of times this might be a little bit hidden from people as well. If you're using a theme, let's say you purchase the theme, some themes have built-in, again, we'll talk about custom post types, but some themes have built-in post types like a team. You know, team is a common one, or we're doing our animal thing, animal shelter, so animals or things like that. So quite often, if a theme includes a custom post type in the theme, they'll often give you some kind of widget that will do what I just showed to display that. So again, I think this is making it so it's more generic, that you can use it for any type of thing you can store in a WordPress database. So more to come. All right, that's the query loop. Image enhancements. Peter, let me stop sharing.
Yeah. And real quick, we did find a solution, an indirect solution to the question about reusable blocks in the sidebar in the widget editor. It is not native to core at this point that I can find, but there is a very good plugin. It's actually something that I use. Somebody had brought up. I apologize for not remembering who it is in the chat right now. But it is the Reusable Blocks extended plugin, which gives a lot of power over how to use reusable blocks. So I was going to, I've used it to do things like create my own block patterns by first creating a usable block and then saving it as a block pattern. But it also allows, it also lets you use reusable blocks as shortcode. And as many things that would come in shortcode, there's also a block interface for the block editor in the widget area. So you add a widget block. I'm going to keep going back and forth between block widgets, a block in the block widget area that you can call up any of your saved reusable blocks.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
About, okay, reusable blocks. One of the most annoying things I found out about them is that if you try to edit any of it after you put it on a page, it overwrites your entire site.
It does.
I figured that out, but when you save them as a pattern,
yep,
does that does the pattern make them editable per page?
Yes. So there's one of two things that you do with a reusable block. Making a block pattern, and we had a guest on that showed how to make block patterns and through code, and there are different ways to do it. But if you use a reusable block and save it as a pattern using this plugin, for example, you can insert that block pattern and edit it independent of anything else. The other option is you have a reusable block that's saved as a reusable block. You insert it, and then there is a block choice there where you can convert it back to standard blocks. And in doing that, it disconnects it from the reusable block is actually a custom post type of the sort. And so it gets saved in the database as a thing. So if you edit that thing, it, like you said, it changes it universally across the site. But if you use a reusable block on a different page and then go to edit that block and say convert it to standard blocks or whatever the exact language is, I can try it here in a second. that will decouple it, and basically now you're just using those blocks. It's almost like it becomes a block pattern through an extra step, if you will. So, Ray, any
Okay, that
have you
was
any
good.
experience
Thank
with
you.
that too? Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just said thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
No, I was actually answering some of the questions or
Great.
the commentary in the chat. Just real quick on that too. Some people brought up some other plugins. Some I haven't had experience with, like Fastest WP. I've used a little
Yep.
bit more on a more complex site. So yeah, that's what I'm saying. This query loop is nowhere near those other plugins in terms of features. But again, I think it's the beginnings of things. And ideally, we'll talk about this more in our wrap up at the end. I think it's start to see where this is heading. You know, and the future of this hopefully is we'll need less of these plugins to do things that, to me, this is such a basic WordPress feature. You know, the fact that WordPress itself is displaying posts for you, it's like, why can't I get access to that and control it a little bit better? So it's, you know, it's the first steps towards that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And just real quick, somebody asked about an example of why you would use a query loop block. Again, I think that example I just showed hopefully is, you know, if you're using a theme that, let's say you want to display blog posts only by a certain category or the way you display them, you want to control, you know, just display, let's say you want to build a portfolio grid of just featured images on your homepage. Unless your theme supports that, or you're going to use a plugin, you would use a query loop block for something like that.
Very good. You want me to take it, or you want to show the
Yep.
next three?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, let me, 1 second here. I forgot. Let me go back and share my screen again. Okay.
All right. So we're kind of combining a few things under this category of image enhancements. But there are a couple areas, a couple of things to look at. And one of them is this this new format that we can use called WebP as an image format. So we're used to JPEGs, GIFs, PNG files, SVGs, but that takes something else. That's a different file type. But WebP is its own image format, and it's a new image format developed by Google that has superior compression. It's been available for actually years now, but it has not been universally accepted, not part of anything that you could do in WordPress without using a plugin. And even then, you might have run into some server issues because it was a file of a different type and of a different extension. But now being able to use WebPs within WordPress is part of core. So, you know, the benefit is it has a smaller image size, depending on how much compression and recompression, and, you know, when you get into all the details of, they use phrases like lossless. One company uses glossy, lossy. So lossy compression means you're losing some quality. You can take a JPEG image and save it at a higher compression rate. And that's when you get all the artifacts. And you have the ability to manage the compression rate on a WebP file, but out of the gate, kind of trying to do it almost pixel to pixel at a certain quality, it can be significantly smaller in file size than PNGs and JPEGs, and it does have what's called the alpha channel, where you get the transparent layer, or an image with a transparent background, which would be GIFs, but we're now more and more used to the PNG file format that also uses transparency. So the WebP format does have that. The problem with WebP not being universally supported was it wasn't working in all browsers. Pretty much all browsers now do support WebP. I don't know the exact number as of today. I didn't find it, but basically it was the holdout was the Mac OS Safari browser, and even then now it's only on some of the older Macs that it would not work. As far as hosting, some of the hosts, I don't know, I have not heard of any recently where there's an issue with the host, and if there is, it's just a matter of saying, hey, host, you're not accepting this file type being uploaded, because you may have a a host that has really locked down security where they're saying, you know, in your upload file, you can only have JPEGs and GIFs and things, that type of thing. So that may be something that you run into. Right now, I think one of the bigger issues with the WebP format is some of the tools that we're using to create images don't output in the WebP format. So you have to either find a tool that does that. If you use Photoshop, it does output as WebP. But there are some online converters that can be used. I'll show a couple here, just bring them up on the screen. But that's one of the issues is like, you know, hey, I want to go to Canva and save some WebP, and as of right now, they're not doing it. We have to assume, since now, you know, WordPress is supporting WebP, that it's going to become pretty ubiquitous pretty quickly. Next slide, Ray. All right, so another thing when we talk about images that we now have available to us, and some folks may have seen this earlier with the if they tried the Gutenberg plugin, is what's called the Duotone filters for images, which basically allows you to put a color filter using two colors, one color if you use the same color, over an image, and basically it highlights it's colors that get applied to the dark parts and the light areas, the shadows and the highlights of an image, to give a color overall overlay, if you will. And it does kind of act as an overlay, because while this is a photo manipulation that works in WordPress, you're not changing anything with the image itself. It's not like going to Photoshop and playing with color filters and saving it as a new file with those colors. The original image stays exactly the same. The filter itself is really a combination of an SVG and a CSS filter applied to that image, which is great because you can adjust them. You can apply those color filters, especially if you get into a situation where you're now setting up like global colors and things like that, to apply the same kind of filtering to any number of images, which now will give you a consistent color effect, or even apply it to branding. But because it is a filter that gets delivered to the browser through the website, and is really happens at on the browser side. If somebody had a direct link to the URL, or if your RSS feed, which references that image directly to the URL, it'll be the original color image, because the filter is not applied. It only happens within WordPress. But we'll show a quick example of how you can just play with that. And it applies to images and cover blocks. Next slide is, this is real quick. This is putting a PDF file, using a file block and having it render that page. It's a kind of embed, something we'll show you pretty quickly, but it's a really neat way, if you use PDFs, that you can bring things and apply them directly in a page, where you then have ways of showing that PDF file in the page in just a matter of a couple of clicks. Pretty neat. I used it previously, actually on one of our pages, but that was where Gutenberg was applied. Now it's in core. So let me show you a couple of these things. I will take over. Go to, first of all, let me make this smaller. I'll share my screen. Now I will go to all right, give me just a sec, because I had another window open and I started talking. While I'm pulling this up, anybody run into anything with these and had any questions about it? Ray, are you using it at all for anything? There we go. This is the guy I want.
No, yeah, I mean, I play around with the Duotone a little bit. Even like Divi has had something similar for a while. I'm not that artistic.
Yeah, yeah,
I end up making things like uglier than prettier.
right.
So.
So if anyone's been working on our build a site with us, you might recognize this little guy. He's on our pet adoption website that we're building. And here's a JPEG, 1920 by 1280 pixels. It's actually bigger than it's being shown here because it's in on this page. It's being shown as a smaller size. But this with this very kind of plain background compresses pretty well with JPEG. And this was probably saved at about an 80%. I'm thinking it's 142 kilobytes in size. This is a WebP image of the exact same image, and this is 68 kilobytes in size. So it's literally, I mean, if you were to put them side by side, I could have brought up like an image slider on a different site, but there's no discernible difference between these images, and yet it's less than half the size. This is going to be more and more important if you're looking at what's called core web vitals and all the things that are meant to make your site, you know, faster, work on mobile more quickly, have Google love you because you're a fast loading site. And when you run some of the tests against core web vitals, you'll get things like warnings that say, hey, you might want to try to compress your image, use modern image image types and higher compression on those. And here's the reason why. It simply takes less time to download this file than this file, and they look exactly the same. Now, what's interesting is, you know, how did I create that WebP file? And there's any number of places that you can go. Here's one set of tools, Red Ketchup IO, and in Red Ketchup they do have a number of tools in the image converter that allows you to basically upload a file and then export it as a WebP image, setting different variables. And then it just works like a regular upload a file. It goes to your image library. There's nothing, once it's there, if I look at my dashboard and come here into my my media files, you know, it is just a WebP image, just like all my other images that work in the media library. So I'm not.
I think that was one of the issues in the past too, right, Peter? That the file type itself wasn't really considered a valid file type. So if you try to upload it, I assume WordPress gave one of those, you know, this file type is not allowed to be updated kind of errors.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it had you have a very limited very limited number of file types that you could upload, and a big reason for that is the safety of the files that come through. That's why you can't upload an SVG file, because an SVG file is actually code, without a plugin that is making sure that it's a safe file to be uploaded, and basically override and approve the upload of an SVG file. But that's the WebP. Now, coming back to any questions to WebP while I pull that page back up. I'm not using them yet, simply because the conversion of the images, using a tool like Red Ketchup IO, there's another one called a Cloud Convert, is another way that you can convert one file type to another. So that would, you know, be a matter of uploading and then saving as a different file type. If I wanted this guy, select that file, convert to WebP. This might take some time, but this is, and I ran out of conversion minutes. The Red Ketchup seems to be okay, but another thing that you could do real quick is use a tool like Short Pixel, which I use for for kind of compressing images. And you can do, as a plugin, you can convert images on the fly. And if you buy credits, you can say, as one of the options, you can say, convert all my images. And what's really nice about it is then you would actually have a JPEG backup of your WebP files. But those are some of the options to go to manage WebP. But it's going to gain in popularity. But right now, it's okay if you ease your way into it, like I am, and probably Ray, the way you are. Because this is an image now, I'm looking just at the first image. We'll talk about the Duotone filter, and the Duotone filter is up here when you highlight an image. And if I go to this circle image up here, this is where I can select my duotones. If I should make this guy smaller. If I apply, let me just put him a little bit smaller. If I apply the duotone right now, it's just set to black and white. If I set to the purple and yellow, if I set to, so it's just as simple as clicking on these. But then what you can also do is you can customize the colors that you want. That's a bad choice. Let's say I want to make the dark parts that red, which I do, which I wouldn't recommend. And don't ever use red and blue directly together. They don't work all that well together. But this is where you could just start applying these filters. That's terrible. Sorry, dog. But you could just start applying these filters. I could clear that, be right where I would, because the filter's just sitting on top. I'm not touching that image at all. But if I like the ones that's kind of basic right out of the gate, let's just say I go with this guy here, and I update this and save it. When I view this page, that filter gets applied to that image. But it's a neat way that you can kind of manage your image, and that'll also work in cover blocks. And then the last thing I wanted to show you was, if I come to this, edit this page, and I wanted to put in a block, and use the file block. And I've uploaded to the media library a PDF file. This is just of a previous, I saved one of our PowerPoint presentations as a PDF. If I select that file block now gives me the ability to have that whole PDF just show up, where you can view the PDF. I can click on the slides, but of course I can turn some of those things off. I can not show that and just show the name and the download button. I can show the inline embed shows that whole image. I can decide to remove the download button and only show it in here. Of course, so you have the download button as part of that instead of a separate button. But it's a neat way. And what's also kind of neat about this too is if you have saved a file, I've got one on the side. I'm going to come over here, and here's just my computer, that image. I'm going to drag and drop a PDF file right onto this page. So let me just actually get rid of the one I just put here, remove that block. So now I'm back to my color dog, my WebP. But if I came here and I just did a drag and drop right onto this page. No, so this doesn't always work because it's showing it, the browser wants to see it. So I'm not sure if that will work. It won't. Sometimes it works where it literally uploads the file in the process. Right then the browser was saying, oh, you want to look at that PDF file. So that didn't quite work for me. But anyway, that file block allows you to do things like drop a PDF file directly in to your page.
I mean, I think the advantage of that, like you said, is more of people don't have to go off to another place or download it, or you keep them on your page. Or some browsers don't have I think most modern browsers these days do tend to have a PDF viewer embedded in them, but yeah,
Right.
I mean, it saves a step.
Exactly. So there you go.
Denise has a quick question. Have you ever had experience using a Flipbook plugin for your PDFs? I have not.
Yes, I have. I've done it with some customers that have large catalogs. There's some free ones out there. There's some ones that I think have limits of page. The only issue with that is now you're getting into a layer of code and interactivity. It's almost like, I think they're using HTML5 for it, but it's almost like it used to be like Flash, right? So it was actually coding in an embedded file. The main issue with that is that's typically done where you're either going out to their site on a blank page, or very often it's done as like an iframe. So a frame of something that's hosted elsewhere brought onto your site. That's what I've done it through iframes. I'm not sure there may be plugin for it, but I don't know if the plugin generates it so much as you're going out to the service. And then with bigger files, it could cost you a lot of money. So.
I can't imagine it looks very good on mobile either. That kind of.
No, yeah, and you know what? That's a huge issue with some of those flip things. I mean, in any option that I've ever had, I've turned it off. It just the only time it works with customers is when, like, I've got a customer who has a lot of landscaping things, hardscaping. So they're linking to their suppliers' catalogs, and some of those catalogs are upwards of 250 pages because there's tons of photography in there. There's all kinds of spec sheets. That's all managed by the vendor who's placing it. We're just embedding that in as an iframe, and then we don't have to worry about it. So in that case, that works well. But other than that, I'm not a big fan of the flipbooks. But in some cases, I've seen it on jewelry sites where it can work for certain parts of the site. Yeah.
I see in the comments, Bridget put an example of one. So Bridget, if you have the plugin that you used for that, maybe if you don't mind, share that with Denise. Maybe she can check it out. All right, let me grab the screen back. Share my screen. Okay. All right, so this one will be pretty quick because I think these are just some editor improvements. Again, things that hopefully make working with the block editor a little more enjoyable. I know there are some nagging things that still make it a little bit quirky for people like me coming from page builders that are a bit more polished. So I'll go through these kind of quickly, real quick. As I said, the block editor user interface has been improved to help make navigating. That's a big thing here, is the navigating between blocks a lot easier. I still struggle, Megan, as we're doing our demo site, we're trying to use native blocks. I still struggle with it a bit too. So hopefully you get some amusement out of watching me fumble with these, but I think that in 5.8, there are some good improvements to making it just easier to navigate. Also some other, improvements to existing blocks. So I'll show you in a second. So just some features for existing blocks. So again, why should we care? It's because they do want to make the experience of using the block editor, better. And eventually, again, we're talking future, eventually start to match what you can see in some, page builders like Elementor, Divi, Beaver Builder, etc. So here's kind of the quick ones that we'll cover. There's the list view. So when you're looking at blocks now, you have a list view. Previously, that displayed as a temporary window, so you'd have to click on it, see what your things look like. But now you can actually kind of have it be pinned over to the side. So I'll show you that in a second. HTML anchors. This is one that you may need this. I'll show an example of the types of sites, probably where this makes sense. So you can easily add HTML anchors now into your blocks. Parent blocks, so being able to select the parent block. This is especially as you start building more nested blocks. So think about blocks that are inside of rows and columns, etc. It's just a way to kind of navigate your way up easier in that. Suggested block transformations. I think this is something that you'll see a bit more in the future. So as you know, or we'll see in a demo in a second, when you click on certain blocks, just like kind of we saw with the pattern inserter, they're adding the ability now to kind of get a preview of what the transformation will look like. So rather than you clicking it and then saying, I don't like this and changing your mind, there's a couple of blocks, social icons we'll try to look at in a second. That one has a good preview. So that's a pattern transformation. And real quickly, we'll look at a couple of these styling options that are now opened. So I'm going to kind of keep this open, so I'll make sure I hit these all kind of quickly. Let me go to homepage again. And so list view, not a lot to show here, but as I said in the past, we're using the old version of WordPress prior to 5.8. If you clicked on this list view, it would show this list, but it would just show it and then it would go away basically. So now you have the ability to kind of have it on the sidebar. So you can navigate. I mean, if you look at this is a good example of a pretty complex set of blocks. I can, put my cursor over these. You can see kind of where you are. So this part hasn't changed, but the ability now to keep the list view up and visible is in my mind, that's a great improvement. So that was one thing, was adding that ability. Let's take a look at HTML anchors. So I'm going to kind of breeze through these quickly, but if you have questions as I'm going through them, certainly jump in. So for HTML anchors, in this case, what this means is, and I think I've added a couple already. So yeah, here we go. So think about probably where this makes the most sense is a page with a lot of text or a blog post. Like, in fact, one of the ones I was thinking of is you look at a site like Kinsta, we'll send this link to everyone. They're very good at writing these long, in-depth blog posts. So one thing that I like too is that they add these anchors. So they have a table of contents section in the very front. And if you look at these, what these really are, if you can see in the bottom right of my browser, these are links to other parts of the document. So when I click on Block API, it jumps me down through the anchor to another piece of text, on that page. So the way you create these were not exposed easily before in WordPress, or especially the block editor. So the way you create them now is when you're at a block, let's add one, let's say so I added one for media. I'll put one down here. I add over cookies, who we are. So when you click on a block now, I don't think every block supports this, but certainly paragraphs and headings do. Over on the right in advanced, you can type in your anchor word here. So the anchor is whatever you want it to be. So I'll just put in, let's call it data sharing. That's my HTML anchor. So as you can see, visually it shows it here, but right now it's kind of useless. The way you would use this is back up on the, let's say I'm creating a table of contents here. So let's say our data sharing policy, something like that. And when I'm going to make this a link. So I want to make it a link, but I want to make it a link to one of my own sections. So the way you do that is put hashtag data sharing, and it's an internal link. So now if I update this page, let's take a look at this page again. So now I've got my own table of contents here. So when I click on our data sharing, it jumps me down to, and again, because I'm in the WordPress admin, it's a little bit hidden, but it basically jumps me down to that section of text. So again, HTML anchors have been around for a long time, but now it's the ability to add them easily in. Parent block, let me find this real quick. So I'll do this on, let's mess around with this page because I'm here. Let me add at the bottom of this a block. So let's say I'm going to add a column, I guess. So I'm going to add a column. Let's make it 2 columns. So we got column 1 here, and then you can add columns in columns. So let me add another column. I'll add another column in here of 50-50 for some reason. And then I'll put in just a paragraph of test. And then here, paragraph test. So in the past, it's sometimes a little bit hard to say, okay, let's say I want to make a change now to my column settings. So if you look at the way this thing looks, I've got nested columns and columns and columns and columns. It's all the way down. But when I click on one of these parents, as you can see, now I have the ability to go up. So now when I click select column, it moves me up to that column level. So even though I was down here at this block level, I can always go up to my parent. And then from here, I think, it'll traverse me back up. So just kind of a way to traverse up this chain of a layout visually. So I don't have to, I could do it through the list view. That's the other, personally, that's my preferred way because I think it's just clearer seeing it as an outline. But when you're down in a section, if I want to quickly go back up, you have that ability to go up a parent level. So again, this is more of a quality of life thing, I think, in the block editor. Pattern transformations. Let me go to the styling options one first while I have that page up, because I think that's probably a quicker one to show. So believe it or not, in the past, I think we saw this when we were working on that demo site we were doing. Out of the box, WordPress did not used to have this ability to actually set things like padding for columns. Like you actually had to go in and do things behind the scenes. Well, now they've listened to our complaints, and now you can add things like, I want to add, I don't know, 20 pixels of padding into this around. So again, a minor thing, but more things are, I guess the point is with this, more things are now exposed, so more properties. So I can change the background color, yay, finally. So there, I want to make it a different color. So really, again, things that probably, to be honest, should have been there from day one, but they're now getting around to making our lives a little bit easier of exposing these kind of properties.
Yeah.
And I'll show real quick, I think, that the social icon transformation thing. So let me do social icons, and I've got to remember how to do it again. So this is one I don't do this very often. Oh, here we go. So it's just showing me the styles. So let's say I'm going to add icons. So let's say I want to add Twitter and Facebook. I won't do that. But what this is doing is it's showing me I do have a couple of choices of do you want default, do you want logos only, dark gray, pill shaped. So not every block is doing this yet, but the thought behind it is, if you have the ability to have different formatting display layouts, do it here before I insert it so I can see what it looks like. So that's one that's coming up.
Yeah.
Any questions on those? And these are the big ones. I think there's other stuff behind the scenes, but these are the ones that kind of stood out to me in terms of kind of improvements to the UI.
The things that you just showed, I use, as I say often, like generate blocks, and now you get a little bit of overlap, and that's all. To me, that's going to be one of our challenges going forward, which is I found a great solution for it. Now certain things are being put in core. When do I, disengage, if at all, from any of the tools? So yeah, what you just showed kind of falls right into that. And the transformation, or the suggested transformation is a weird word for me for this.
Yeah.
But I saw it used in things like where it's going to be really kind of neat is when you if you're doing some full site editing and you're editing the header, and now you're, instead of trying to find all of these things, you're literally going through a carousel of this kind of header with the logo on the left and the navigation, and one arrow over, oh, it's centered and underneath, and now you can just kind of toggle through them and go, I want that one. And
Which is a great segue into what I think is this is the hidden gem in 5.8. But Peter, I don't want to steal your.
No, that's good. Yeah. So what we're going to be talking about is, we actually touched on some of this. We're talking about the block patterns and the reusable blocks and all. But one of the things that's being introduced, kind of quietly, honestly, because it's going to be landing in, being made more and more available, and being more visible in core, is a growing library of block patterns that are in the WordPress.org repository. So we know the repository for WordPress.org for themes and for plugins, and now we're going to have block patterns, and I'll show you where to find that. And it's really easy to just copy and paste out of there onto your site, and how to get them. Eventually, it's going to be, just like, and I don't use this, but that idea that if you're searching for a block right now and it's not available, you don't have it, but it might say, oh, but you can download what you're asking for. Here's some things you can download as plugins. So in the block repository, it will become more and more available through core to this repository, to kind of show you, to make some of this layout stuff faster and faster, and using the advantage of people who have put the work into designing things different designers. And again, as that grows, you'll have more and more options. You'll see families and things. Some of this stuff has already been available through specific themes, starter sites, and now some of the starter sites, they've actually deconstructed them down to the patterns within. That's what a lot of this this is all about. And then real quick, then the next slide, just want to talk, because we're kind of in the same idea of grouping blocks together as a block pattern or as a reusable block, something we talked about a little bit earlier. The reusable block interface is improving a little bit. Just subtle things, kind of coattails on what Ray was just talking about, some of the other user interface things where naming your blocks, being able to kind of do that quickly and all, it's just gotten a little bit cleaner, a little bit neater. So this is the continuous improvement that's being applied to the block editor and all things related to it. So let me grab the screen, if I may. Yeah, and I'm going to go to this screen, and Ray, I'm not going to show it twice. Are you seeing the right screen?
And the dogs.
The dogs. Yeah, that's my Kata from, we had him for 17 years.
Oh,
So, okay, this is, right now, this is a set of blocks, right? And I'm going to show the repository and then show this, so I don't want to forget the repository. So the block pattern directory is found at wordpress.org/patterns. This is the URL here, and we'll make sure it's in the notes and everywhere. Because if you look up here in your menu choices and themes and plugins and all, I don't see it there right now, and I haven't seen any specific links to it other than the fact that this is now available. WordPress.org/patterns. And you could just scroll through. You can sort them by type. So here's some buttons. Here are columns set up with content in those columns. And say you saw something and you said, you know what, I like taking this team social card, looks like a jump, but you know, you can look at it more closely by clicking on it. Or if you notice that there is a copy button, say, oh yeah, you know what, I can use that. So let me copy that pattern. That pattern is copied. Now I'm going to go to the page where my dog is, and let me just paste it. And I just took that whole pattern and everything that made it and dropped it into this website, just that fast. It's a beautiful thing because, you know, again, you have all of this design work that's going on, and you'll find it'll build in terms of like families of similar styles, you know, ways of managing headers. Now, coming back to these pages, these are placeholders, right? So you would go in here and now you would replace that with your image. Obviously, you would edit this text with your text. You would edit the social icons with the links to your social icons. But you know, going over here and saying, you know, they might not go together, but oh, I really like 2 images with shared color strip. That is something I like. Maybe you could copy right from here, go to your page, paste that right in, and now I have that. And basically, it's just the blocks that are group blocks, the background image. Now you would replace these with your images, right? So these are placeholders. But you can see how cool this is in terms of a quick way to get a style, build out a page using these block patterns. So curious if anyone's got any questions on that or feedback, but it is wordpress.org/patterns. And then
Martha had a question about how do you apply the CSS after pasting? Well, it's on your site. So once it's there, then you can target it. You can, as Peter was saying, you can either change whatever you can change the properties through the block editor. You can change the colors and all that. But yeah, you can start adding CSS classes to the sections or components, and then you do your own styling rules for it.
That's right. Good point.
I mean, I think, like I said, I'm really excited about, because this is something that, I mean, you do see like, you see Cadence and other themes doing something similar, where they're starting to, again, when you're first building a website, sometimes it's hard to see sites are really made up of these kind of patterns. In general, a lot of sites are kind of styled or laid out that same way. So rather than starting from scratch, having that ability to say, I kind of know what I want, and looking at a library of these things, be able to copy something in quickly, to me, that's fantastic. That's just a time saver for everybody,
Yep. And look at, how quickly, you can have some of these professionally designed things added to your site.
Yeah.
So now what I wanted to show you real quick is, so here is something that I created real quick. All right. So it's 4 columns and basically, and by the way, if you look at this, 2 things I wanted to show. Honestly, I don't, the list view that we've been using in probably the next version, dragging and dropping and moving this stuff will all be part of the list view. So it's going to get that easier. Again, I'm doing that with a plugin. That plugin is going to be unnecessary now because it's going to be built in core, which is great. And then one other thing, Ray, forgive me if you've shown this already, but I use the block edit right above. But if you're somebody who prefers the top toolbar, it goes to the top, but it used to be up here next to it, and I always got lost. Now it's on a row below, so it makes it a little bit easier to find the details for the blocks that you're editing. So let me turn that off. But now, say I grab this whole group, and right now I'm highlighted this whole group, and using what Ray was showing before, you can keep going higher and higher until you get that whole group. I could take this, and now I can add to reusable blocks. The first thing that happens is this is new, the popping up box, and I'm going to call it the kata block. And I can save that. And now that I've saved that, if I come here, I don't know if I have to refresh the page. I will find out in a second. If I go to, I browse all, but now if I look into my reusable blocks, there's the kata block that's saved. So I quickly saved that as reusable block. I got to rename it. That name carries over. You can edit that name. I'm going to add that in. Oh, and you also, you get that that preview of it. And I have slowed down my browser because I have too many things open. I do, because I have all these patterns. But well, let's just exit this real quick. Should be able to come here, add, I'll browse all, my reusable block that got saved. And now I've added that back in. I'm stacking them, but this is using that reusable block. Yes, if I edit this anywhere that block is used, but here's what we were saying before, where you can go into this and convert to regular blocks. Now you can edit it separated from the rest. I could also use that, and I can show you if we've got time. I'm just checking the clock. That Reusable Blocks extended plugin to convert this to a block pattern and then use it as a block pattern like any other block pattern, which is really, really handy. But this whole ability to save, reusable blocks becoming easier to use. Keep in mind, you edit the main block and it's universal unless you decouple it by saving, as it said, it was convert to regular blocks, or saving it as a block pattern, currently now being done through a plugin. kind of went through that quick. Any questions on that?
That's good. Let me, I'm gonna grab the ball back real quick because I do want to save some time for questions at the end.
You got it.
All right, so this one's gonna be really quick. So
Yeah.
this is theme.json, and my thing is, so what, I'll talk about this a little bit. So what is it? It's a way for theme authors to provide some fine-grained control over global styles, block styles, and block editor settings. So again, unless you're on here as a theme author, if you are, welcome. Thanks for joining our little meetup here. But
Yeah.
at 99% of people, you probably don't care about this. In the future, though, this is something to look out for in terms of just simplifying things. So my understanding is the reason this is being introduced is Blocks and Gutenberg have added, as much as they make things a bit simpler, if you're a theme author, it's added a bit of complexity in terms of where do you put certain settings. People used to know the structure of WordPress themes because WordPress itself and the idea of themes has been around since WordPress 2 or 3, or early days of WordPress, that idea. So anyway, this idea, this theme.json, they're trying to help out theme authors. So this might be something for you just to be aware of if you suddenly see this kind of file show up in your file directory. So this is what it looks like. This is kind of a section of what a theme.json looks like. And in fact, I may have a bigger one. Give me 1 second here to show you. This is kind of what it looks like. So it's, again, you probably wouldn't ever go in here and edit this, but if you ever see this, where this file lives is it's at the directory level, the top level directory of your theme. So as themes are starting to support full site editing, you'll start to see this file show up there along with the other theme files. So that's the thing I said. Right now, most themes, if they're not supporting full site editing, you're not going to have one of these files, and that's fine. WordPress doesn't need it. But it does help consolidate some settings, things like color, typography, spacing, etc. And I'll show a real quick demo, like literally to try to make this a minute or so. So if I go back to, forget about those changes. If I go back to my demo site, and I first need to turn on my Gutenberg plugin real quick. And remember, I have a theme on here that does support full site editing. So this TT1 blocks, I'm going to activate this. So if I don't do this at home, but I'm just going to show real quick. Don't go in and edit this thing. But if you look in the theme directory, you'll see this thing, theme.json. So before our meetup, I did actually, I added something in here. So normally this theme provides a palette, and I'll show you where this comes in a second. So it provides a palette that you can use throughout your site of different colors. So I added a color in here, I added the Prince purple color. So if I go to, let's say, let me go to one of these pages. Oops, sorry, go to my page, and I'm gonna go to the home page. So I changed the setting in here. As I said, I added a new color in here. So where that shows up is in my color palette. Now we've got this gaudy purple, which I've named Prince. So that's it. So now it's selected it. One bonus thing on this, because this confused me a little bit too, is okay, I've changed my text now to purple. So what does this mean for my live site? So if I go to my live site now, I'm going to open this up in real quick in incognito window. My live site, this is purple. So where is this styling? Where does the styling live? And this is where I think things from most of us now, this is where it affects us. This isn't in my normal .css file. This is in my theme that .json file. So this is just, you're gonna have to, eventually I think things will be a lot clearer, but for now, it's another place for you to perhaps hunt and peck, like, who is styling this thing? So if I inspect this, for example, you can see here's my Prince color, and this is a whole separate topic, but this is what's called CSS variables or CSS attributes. So it's using CSS because that's all web pages use, but now it's a slightly different format than we might be used to in terms of the way websites are set up. So anyway, not the theme.json coming in the future, something interesting. Most of us probably won't be affected by it right now. And
For developers, it really, I've seen guys, redo a site lightning fast because just changing things in that one file.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So let's kind of wrap things up. I know we have like 10 minutes left. It's kind of funny. We took with sometimes when I read the articles about 5.8, people push this as the lead. We've kind of pushed this all the way down because I think this kind of leads into our wrap up thing. So one of the big things that 5.8 introduces is this concept of full site editing, and we've talked about this a little bit before in the template editor. So I'll cover this one, and Peter, maybe you want to cover the blocks part after this. So kind of, what is this? It's an ongoing thing. So 5.8 is the beginning of this, but this idea of template editing and full site editing, it's really a collection of tools and features rolling out through multiple versions, which allows you, WordPress user, to basically build everything on your site using blocks. So Peter showed in the beginning the widget area. Now you can actually use widgets. You can use blocks in widgets. Well, that's kind of, that's great, but what about my header and my footer? It's like, well, maybe, Yeah. So the idea is in the future, you can use blocks. Everything's just gonna be made up of blocks. So there, as I said, today, there's still some parts of your website that you have to, if your theme doesn't let you change it easily, you've got to go in there and either change code by hand, edit things, install a plugin, or again, rely on your theme. So this idea is the future is blocks everywhere. So here's some of the stuff being introduced in 5.8.
Yeah, no, the blocks that are specific to page layouts, headers, footers, all the theme blocks, the loop that you showed, that really allows you to kind of build everything all through this block editor. But I think, and as we're closing down, don't worry about any of this stuff for a lot of reasons. One is if you have a theme, or if you're set up in such a way where you're happy with the way your headers and footers work, then that's where you are. This is, for people who are developing more sites, who really want to get into it or have super granular control, where they're very specifically picking things up and moving. Well, what you used to have to do in PHP code and CSS and all kinds of things now is a matter of using these blocks and manipulating them. But only if you want to, only if your theme even supports it, or if you put in the code that then opens this up to you. But other than that, and the reason we kind of demoted this when so many people are making this, so important, is I think it's just going to apply to a small percentage of the people, even going into the future, because a lot of folks are like, you know what, just give me that header pattern that I like. Let me do that, and then I'm done. I don't need to, get into building all of these things. So,
right. And I'll show just a quick peek of, again, template editing. Again, as this is getting built out more, we probably will do some demos and show this, a little bit more. But here's the idea: is, for example, today, if you're working on a page and you say, hey, I want to. You don't really have control today of some of the styling of your page, meaning the actual HTML layout, and that's what these templates are. So templates have been around in WordPress since the very beginning. And in fact, let me just show you again back to this one for a second. But when I'm talking template, I'm specifically talking about WordPress templates. So in this theme that I'm using, if I look at the theme editor, I'll see what's even in here. But these are the templates. So these are the files. So if a 404 page, 404 is when something's not found. So for example, if I put in a bad URL, this should go to this is my 404 template. Nothing here. Where is this? If you look for this page, if I look for this word, nothing here, I can't find it. That doesn't exist in my page layout. So, when we're talking about templates, that's what we mean. So you will have the ability in the future to actually create your own 404 page or blog post page, those kind of things. So that's what we're talking about. So it's starting to get introduced in 5.8, but it's not quite there yet. Which probably leads into the wrap up. And I'll just talk for a minute, and then certainly Peter, add your thoughts in here too. So a lot of the things we showed today, my feeling, especially as I'm playing around with this, is it's a good beginning. It's a good start. And I think we could all say that. That's how I felt back in 2018 when Gutenberg first was starting to get introduced. It was 2018, it was kind of like, yeah, it's a good start, but give me back my Divi, give me back my Beaver builder. I will say where we are today, 2021, is Gutenberg has come a long, long way just in those couple of years. To me, again, I still don't feel it's a complete replacement for what some page builders have done, but I am seeing the future a bit in terms of, as Peter was saying, there's a lot of things that I had to rely on a page builder or rely on a theme for, and now that power is back into my hands, and it's back in my hands in core. So where that is exciting to me is having some more stuff built into WordPress core. Yes, it may make things seem a little bit more difficult in the beginning, but at least I trust it more in the sense of I know it's going to be developed and not abandoned. It's part of the main application. It's not just some weird thing that, you know, when you switch themes, you're going to have this huge learning curve of, you know, how does this thing work? It's a standard part of WordPress. So I'm excited. 5.8, a lot of stuff came into it, but it's not the end. So Peter, what do you want to add to that?
No, I think this idea of what we always say is take everything we talked about, go off on a test site or just a page off to the side and try a couple of things. That's all that we do ultimately, even when we're building this. We go out and experiment, sometimes live in front of you, and we'll see how it goes. But yeah, and then it's just, nothing says that all of these things have to be applied all at once to anything that you're doing, if anything at all. And if you don't like the widget, the block editor and widgets, as we had shown, Ray showed earlier, there's a plugin for that. If you don't like the block editor, people still using the classic editor, that's fine. But now, hopefully we're showing things like if you're building a blog post and all of a sudden you want to do a pull quote in the middle of it, and certain things really like. And now to be able to go to a block pattern library and copy and paste something in and really just improve your design so efficiently and so effectively, and things that used to take a lot of work, a lot of time and develop or something, I got somebody who bought Elementor just because they wanted to do this one thing. And now it's like, you put all of this overhead on your site that now it's just this one little couple of blocks to put in there. So
that's the big thing. You sort of echo that. We talk about this as we were coming up with these slides is, in the future, I do see this also reducing the need for so many plugins for certain sites because things are built in. I mean, that's the theory behind blocks, and maybe making, all these themes. There's so many themes out there in the world, but it's like, you really don't need all these themes if you can pull that functionality and allow people to do what these themes are doing. And I'm most excited about the template directory, repository, where that's going to be in the future, because that's back to don't reinvent the wheel. There's no secret to how you create a 3-column layout with a background, but unless you're using good page builder that can export things, unless you have somebody who's willing to share that layout with you, it's like we're all reinventing the wheel. Like, oh God, how do I set up these columns and all that? Just give me a place I can just grab that thing and just mess around with it. So to me, I think that's the exciting part of this. These are the beginnings of this, but where I see it going forward in the future is more people start to build, more people get involved. Hopefully there's more sharing of information with everyone. So with that, any final questions or comments from people? I assume everyone has 5.8, because if you're getting automatic updates on your sites, you probably have it. And I'd say, step into it kind of slowly, tread in slowly. The widget area, to me, I think that's the best place to play with it. Obviously you can play with the block editor in any page or post, but to kind of see what's coming, try to create your next widget using blocks and kind of see the power of what's coming in the future. And check out that pattern directory. We'll send out links to that afterwards too. And we'll send out as well, obviously, slides and links to the recording afterwards. So
and questions, Facebook group, Meetup, if you're not in Facebook, and as we start building out our Hartford WP website. That's the final thought. Exactly. So next month we're going to get back on track. We're going to go back to our let's build the site together. We're up to part 4-ish. But this was a good segue and a good little break, because when we're going to be doing something in part 4 where you may see
some of the stuff we talked about tonight, you're going to see in action. So very exciting. You'll see us fumble through using WordPress to build out a piece of the site. The timing was perfect for the next feature we're putting in. So thanks everyone for joining us tonight. We hope you'll join us for next month's meetup. And again, take care. If any questions, like Peter said, I'll send out links and everything and recording afterwards. So we look forward to seeing everyone again.
Great. Good night.
Thanks everyone. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.